I stood on the stage of the Plaza Hotel, trembling under the spotlight as 300 pairs of eyes bore into me like daggers. My sister Sophia's voice dripped with mock sweetness as she held the microphone toward my face. "Clara, darling, don't hide anymore. Come up here and say a few words. At least do something useful for once, right?" The crowd erupted in awkward laughter. My mother Eleanor watched from her front row seat, her lips curved in satisfaction. This was my punishment for existing. For being the daughter who wasn't enough. For daring to breathe the same air as the golden child on her wedding day. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But then something happened that would change everything. A man I had never met before stood up from his seat, and with that single movement, the entire ballroom fell silent. His presence commanded absolute authority. And what he said next would detonate like a bomb in the middle of my family's perfect facade. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened that night, before I reveal how one stranger's intervention would catapult me from the shadows into the light, I need you to understand how I got there. How a family could treat their own daughter like she was invisible, like she was nothing. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment below telling me your story because you're not alone. I wasn't alone either, even though it took me years to realize it. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in the Hale family, where appearances meant everything and love was a currency distributed based on performance. My older sister Sophia was the sun around which our entire family orbited. Beautiful, charming, ambitious, she could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was the afterthought. The second daughter who came along when they had already invested all their hopes and dreams into perfecting the first. From the time I was young, the message was brutally clear. I remember being 7 years old, watching Sophia twirl in her pink ballet outfit before her lesson. I asked my mother if I could take classes too. She barely looked up from her coffee. "We can't afford 2 sets of lessons, Clara. Besides, Sophia has natural grace. You're more of a bookish type." The dismissal in her voice was so casual, so matter-of-fact, as if my desire to dance was an inconvenience she shouldn't have to address. I watched Sophia leave for ballet every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 8 years. I never asked for anything again. The pattern repeated itself in every aspect of our lives. Sophia got the private tutors in math and science, sitting at the dining room table with patient instructors who praised her efforts. I did my homework alone in my room, struggling through algebra problems with no one to ask for help. When I brought home my first report card with straight A's in 5th grade, my mother glanced at it and said, "Very nice, sweetheart." Then she immediately turned to Sophia. "And how was your piano recital practice today, darling? Tell me everything." When we took family photos, the photographer would position us with Sophia front and center. "Now, Clara, just step back a bit. A little to the left. Perfect. You're framing your sister beautifully." I became a prop in the background of Sophia's starring role. The photographic evidence of my childhood tells the story clearly. In every image, Sophia is radiant and centered, while I'm a blurred figure in the periphery, slightly out of focus, as if even the camera couldn't quite see me. My mother Eleanor never missed an opportunity to compare us, and she did it with a cruelty that seemed to bring her satisfaction. One morning at breakfast, I'd been excited to tell her about a short story I'd written for English class. My teacher had read it aloud and told me I had real talent. Before I could finish explaining, my mother interrupted. "That's lovely, Clara. You know, Sophia just got elected as treasurer of her student council. Isn't that impressive? Leadership skills, that's what colleges look for." She turned to Sophia with a beaming smile. "We're so proud of you, darling." I sat there, my story forgotten, feeling my excitement curdle into shame. Why wasn't writing worth celebrating? Why did everything I did seem small and insignificant next to Sophia's achievements? Later that week, after Sophia forgot to study for a test and got a C, my mother comforted her. "Everyone has off days, sweetheart. You're under so much pressure with all your activities." When I brought home a single B+ on a chemistry test that same week, my mother's response was ice cold. "Why can't you be more like your sister? She manages to excel at everything. Why don't you try harder? Why are you always so difficult?" I wanted to scream that I was trying, that I studied until midnight most nights, that I'd gotten 5 A's and 1 B+, and that should count for something. But I'd learned that defending myself only made things worse. So I absorbed the criticism, swallowed the hurt, and tried even harder. I tried. God, how I tried. I got straight A's throughout high school, hoping that academic achievement would earn me a fraction of the attention Sophia received for simply existing. I taught myself architecture and design, spending countless hours in the library, checking out books on Frank Lloyd Wright, Zaha Hadid, sustainable urban planning. I filled sketchbooks with building designs, dreaming of creating something beautiful, something that would make them see me. I taught myself design software using YouTube tutorials, working on an old laptop I'd bought with money from my part-time job at a coffee shop. I created a portfolio website with my best work. Innovative designs for green buildings, community spaces, urban gardens integrated with residential towers. I poured my heart into every sketch, every rendering, but I never showed it to my family. What was the point? They'd already made it clear that my dreams were less important than Sophia's. I worked part-time jobs throughout high school and college, first at that coffee shop, then at a bookstore, then tutoring other students in subjects I'd mastered on my own. I did it to avoid asking my parents for money, to avoid hearing my father sigh and say, "Again, Clara. We just gave you money last month," while simultaneously handing Sophia a credit card with no limit for her shopping trips. I did it to avoid being more of a burden than I already was, but nothing I did mattered. When Sophia graduated from college with a 3.2 gigapascals and a degree in design, my parents threw her a massive celebration party at the country club. They invited over 100 people. There was a live band, champagne towers, a slideshow of Sophia's accomplishments set to inspirational music. My father gave a toast that made grown men tear up. Our daughter Sophia has always reached for the stars. We couldn't be prouder of the woman she's become. Watching her chase her dreams has been the greatest joy of our lives. I served drinks at that party. My mother asked me to help the catering staff since they were short-handed. I was 20 years old, watching my sister receive the love and celebration I craved, while wearing a black vest and carrying a tray of canapes. 2 years later, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in architecture. I'd made the dean's list every semester. I'd won an award for my senior thesis project. I'd been accepted to a prestigious graduate program with partial funding. I told my parents about graduation 3 weeks in advance, hoping they might want to plan something. My mother nodded absently. "Oh, that's coming up already? Time flies." On graduation day, they attended the ceremony, sitting in the back, leaving halfway through to beat the traffic. Afterward, back at home, my mother handed me a Hallmark card with $50 tucked inside. "That's nice, dear. Congratulations." She said it with the same tone she'd used to comment on the weather. Then she turned to Sophia, who'd stopped by for dinner. "Now help your sister move into her new apartment this weekend, won't you, Clara? She's starting at Harrison Interiors on Monday. Isn't that exciting? It's such a prestigious firm." Sophia beamed. "I'm so nervous. But Mom and Dad have been amazing. They co-signed my lease on this gorgeous apartment in Chelsea. 2 bedrooms, can you believe it? And they helped me pick out all the furniture. Dad's Amex got quite the workout." She laughed, easy and light, because money and support had always come easily to her. I stood there holding my $50 bill and my generic congratulations card. I was moving into a basement studio in Washington Heights the following week, a place with bars on the windows and water stains on the ceiling. A place I could barely afford even with my part-time job and my student loans looming. I'd be eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches while Sophia enjoyed her parents-funded lifestyle in Chelsea. No one asked about my graduate school acceptance. No one asked about my thesis award. No one asked about anything. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom that had always felt like a guest room, I let myself cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that I muffled with my pillow because I didn't want to disturb the household. Why wasn't I enough? What was so fundamentally wrong with me that my own parents couldn't love me the way they loved Sophia? The financial disparity was staggering, and it became even more obvious as we got older. Over the years, I did the math in my head, a painful calculation I couldn't stop myself from making. My parents had funded Sophia's entire lifestyle from birth to adulthood, her college tuition, fully paid, 4 years at a private university, over $200,000. My tuition, paid with loans that I'd be repaying for the next 20 years. Her first car, a sleek BMW 3 Series, gifted on her 22nd birthday with a giant bow in the driveway and a champagne breakfast. I took the subway and occasionally borrowed a friend's beat-up Honda when I absolutely had to drive somewhere. When Sophia wanted to start her interior design business 2 years after graduation, my parents gave her $50,000 in seed money. Just like that. An early inheritance, my father called it, as if that made it fair. I heard them discussing it at a family dinner, my father explaining how he'd set up an LLC for her, how excited they were to be investors in her future. I sat at the end of the table, invisible as always, doing the math. $50,000. That would have covered my graduate school tuition completely. That would have meant no more loans, no more debt, no more choosing between buying groceries and buying textbooks. I waited until Sophia left that night, then gathered my courage and approached my father in his study. He was reading the Wall Street Journal, comfortable in his leather chair. "Dad," I started, my voice shaking. "I've been thinking about graduate school. I got accepted to Columbia's architecture program. I was wondering if there might be any way you could help with tuition. Even partially. I could work part-time, and I have some funding, but it would make such a difference if—" He cut me off with a look of genuine confusion, as if I'd asked him something in a foreign language. "Clara, we just made a significant investment in your sister's business. Money doesn't grow on trees." Besides, his tone shifted to something almost condescending. "Do you really think graduate school is the right choice for you? It's expensive, competitive. Your sister has ambition, a clear business plan. She's going places. You're more of a safe bet for a stable, quiet life. Have you considered just getting a regular job? Architecture is such a risky field." His words hit me like a physical blow. "We're investing in her potential," he continued, not even noticing my expression. "You understand, don't you?" I understood perfectly. I understood that to him, to both of them, I had no potential worth investing in. I was the safe bet. The boring one. The forgettable one. The daughter whose dreams were too risky to fund but whose sister's dreams were worth every penny. It was like being told that my potential didn't exist, that I was meant to be small, quiet, forgettable. That I should accept my role as the supporting character in the family story and stop asking for more. So I became those things. I made myself smaller. I learned to sit in corners at family gatherings, nursing a drink, watching everyone else laugh and bond. I learned to smile and nod when they made jokes at my expense. When Aunt Beatrice would say things like, "Still living in that tiny apartment, Clara? When are you going to get a real job?" I'd force a laugh and change the subject. I learned that love in the Hale household was conditional, transactional, and I had failed to meet the conditions. I wasn't charming enough, successful enough, interesting enough. I existed in their lives as an obligation, a reminder that they'd had a second daughter they didn't quite know what to do with. Then came Sophia's engagement to Mark Vance, a successful finance professional whose family moved in the same elite circles as ours. The wedding planning became a year-long obsession for my mother. Every weekend was devoted to venue tastings, dress fittings, floral arrangements. I was included in none of it except when they needed manual labor. "Clara, come help us move these centerpieces." "Clara, can you pick up the programs from the printer?" I was the unpaid assistant, never the beloved daughter. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother called me into the living room. She didn't ask me to sit down. She stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, and delivered her announcement like a corporate memo. "We've been looking at the seating chart, and we've decided you'll sit in the back during the ceremony. We have a lot of important guests, and the front rows are reserved for people who matter to Sophia's future." I felt something crack inside my chest. People who matter. I wasn't people who mattered. I was her sister. I had shared a childhood with her, even if it had been an unequal one. I had been there for every milestone, every achievement, cheering from the sidelines even when no one cheered for me. And now I was being relegated to the back of the room like a distant acquaintance they were obligated to invite. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, because that's what I always did. The day of the wedding arrived. The Plaza Hotel was transformed into a fairy tale setting with thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and champagne flowing like water. The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the third-to-last row, next to some college friends of the groom I had never met. I watched my sister float down the aisle in a gown that cost more than my entire year's rent. I watched my parents beam with pride. I watched as the officiant talked about the importance of family, and I wondered if I was even part of that definition. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, a space so opulent it felt like stepping into another century. I found my assigned seat, tucked away behind a massive floral arrangement of orchids, so large I could barely see the main tables. It was deliberate. I was meant to be hidden. But even that wasn't enough for my mother. Eleanor found me as I was settling into my chair. She didn't sit down. She grabbed my elbow hard enough to leave a mark and pulled me to an even more secluded corner behind the orchid display. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin as she leaned in close, her breath sharp with champagne. "Listen to me very carefully, Clara. Your presence here is already an embarrassment. Sit here. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Don't ruin your sister's special day." Her voice was low and venomous, each word a tiny blade. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She released my arm and swept away in her designer gown, leaving me alone in the shadows. I sat there for what felt like hours. Waiters passed by without seeing me. Guests laughed and danced mere feet away, but I was in a different world, a world where I didn't exist. The loneliness was suffocating. I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly, trying to distract myself from the ache in my chest. Then Sophia stood up to give her toast. She looked radiant, her smile brilliant as she thanked everyone for coming. She talked about her wonderful parents who had supported her every dream. She talked about her amazing husband who saw her for who she truly was. She talked about her friends who had stood by her side. She listed names, offered anecdotes, laughed at inside jokes. She never mentioned me, not once. It was as if I didn't exist at all, as if 26 years of being her sister had amounted to nothing. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry here. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. That's when my Aunt Beatrice walked past. She didn't even try to lower her voice. Poor thing. No ambition whatsoever. "I suppose she'll just leech off the family her whole life." The women with her giggled. I recognized them as my mother's country club friends. They all glanced in my direction, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell them that I had ambition, that I had dreams, that I had worked harder than any of them could imagine to become something, despite being told I was nothing. But the words stayed trapped in my throat, just like they always did. Then I noticed a man sitting near my secluded corner. He hadn't been there before. He was in his early 30s, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that spoke of serious wealth, but it wasn't his appearance that caught my attention. It was the way he was watching everything unfold. Not with the polite interest of a wedding guest, but with the calculating assessment of someone taking notes. He turned his gaze to me, and I quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. But he stood and walked over, stopping beside the orchid arrangement. His voice was deep and measured when he spoke. "Are you hiding, or are you being hidden?" I looked up, startled. No one had addressed me directly all evening except to move me out of the way. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe both." He studied me for a moment. "I'm Alexander Sterling. I'm here as a potential investor in your brother-in-law's company. And I have to say, I've been watching this circus for the past hour, and it's one of the most disturbing displays of family dynamics I've seen outside of a psychology textbook." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever acknowledged what I lived through. No one had ever suggested it was wrong. "What's your name?" he asked. Clara Hale?" His eyes sharpened with recognition. "Hale, your family, and they have you hidden behind the flowers like you're something to be ashamed of." "That's exactly what I am," I said quietly. "Something to be ashamed of." He was about to respond when suddenly Sophia's voice rang out through the sound system. Everyone's attention turned to the stage where she stood, microphone in hand, her smile just a bit too sharp. "Clara, where are you? Don't be shy now. Come on up here." My blood turned to ice. This was a trap. I knew it instinctively, but everyone was looking around, trying to locate me. I had no choice. I stood slowly, emerging from behind the orchids, like a ghost materializing from the shadows. The walk to the stage felt like walking to my own execution. When I reached Sophia, she wrapped an arm around my shoulders in a parody of sisterly affection. Her grip was tight, possessive. "Come on, Clara, you've been hiding all night. Say a few words. Tell everyone what it's like to watch your older sister achieve everything. Tell them what it's like to be you." The cruelty in her tone was veiled just enough that most people wouldn't catch it, but I heard it clearly. This was her moment of triumph. Not just marrying Mark, but publicly humiliating me in front of everyone who mattered in her world. The spotlight was blinding. I couldn't see faces, just shapes. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence stretched on, excruciating. Someone in the crowd coughed. I heard a few uncomfortable laughs. I was failing, just like I always did, just like they expected me to. Then I heard a chair scrape back. The movement was sharp enough to cut through the awkward tension. Everyone turned to look. Alexander Sterling had stood up. Just that simple action commanded instant silence. The ballroom, which had been filled with whispers and giggles at my expense, went completely still. He walked toward the stage with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. He took a microphone from a nearby server, and when he spoke, His voice carried an authority that made even my mother sit up straighter. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here tonight as a potential investor in Mr. Vance's venture. I've spent the evening observing, as I always do before committing significant capital to any project. Because you see, I don't just invest in businesses, I invest in people. In character. In integrity. He paused, letting his words sink in. He looked directly at Mark, then at Sophia, then at my mother. What I've witnessed tonight has been incredibly enlightening. I've watched a family publicly humiliate one of their own for entertainment. I've watched a young woman be hidden away, insulted and degraded while everyone laughs. I've watched the very people who are supposed to love her treat her as less than human. The silence was deafening. Mark's face had gone pale. My mother's carefully composed expression was cracking. And here's the thing about character. You don't get to turn it on and off. How you treat people when you think it doesn't matter reveals everything about how you'll operate when it does. A family willing to destroy one of their own for appearances has no ethical foundation to build anything sustainable. He let that statement hang in the air for a long moment. So I want to make something very clear right now. The $50 million investment deal we've been negotiating? It's canceled, effective immediately. I don't do business with people who lack basic human decency. The impact of his words was like a physical shockwave through the room. $50 million. That was the lifeline Mark's company desperately needed. That was the deal they'd been counting on to launch their expansion, and it had just evaporated in front of 300 witnesses. Alexander turned to me, extending his hand. His expression softened slightly. Miss Hale, I think you've spent enough time in this place. Would you like to leave? I looked at his hand, then at my family. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Sophia's face was twisted with rage and disbelief. Mark was staring at Alexander with an expression of pure panic. For the first time in my life, I had the power. I had a choice. I could stay and try to smooth things over, play the peacemaker, sacrifice myself once again to save them from the consequences of their cruelty. Or I could walk away. I took Alexander's hand. Yes. Please. He led me down from the stage and through the ballroom. The crowd parted like water. No one spoke. No one tried to stop us. They just watched as I walked out of that place, out of the shadow I'd been forced to live in, with a man who had seen me when my own family refused to. We walked through the ornate lobby of the plaza and out into the cool New York evening. His car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. He opened the door for me, and I slid inside, still in shock. My hands were shaking. My mind was reeling. What had just happened? What had I just done? Alexander got in beside me and handed me a bottle of water from the console. Drink this. You're in shock. I am, I admitted, taking the bottle with trembling fingers. I don't understand. Why did you do that? You don't even know me. He was quiet for a moment as the driver pulled away from the hotel. I did some research when I heard the Vance name. Due diligence. I always do. In the process, I came across an old portfolio website under the name Clara Hale, Architectural Designs, innovative, thoughtful work with a focus on sustainable urban planning, the kind of vision that's rare in this industry. Then I arrived at that wedding and watched the woman who created those designs being treated like she was worthless. The cognitive dissonance was disturbing. He pulled out a tablet and opened it to my old website, the one I'd created in college and mostly forgotten about. I'd poured my heart into those designs, sketching out green buildings, community spaces, urban gardens integrated with residential towers, dreams I'd had before life taught me to stop dreaming. This work is exceptional, Clara. It's forward-thinking. It's exactly what my company needs right now. I stared at the screen, barely recognizing my own work. That feels like a lifetime ago. It was 6 months ago. You're still that person. You've just been buried under years of being told you're not. But here's the thing. I don't give out charity. I don't do pity hires. If I offer you a position, it's because I believe you can deliver, and I'm about to make you an offer. He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. Sterling Enterprises is launching a new project, a sustainable urban community called Elysian Towers, residential, commercial, and green space integrated into one ecosystem. It's ambitious. It's expensive, and it needs a visionary to lead the design concept team. I want you to do it. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Me? You want me to lead? Don't mistake this for kindness, Clara. This is a test, a battlefield. You'll be working with some of the most competitive architects in the city. You'll face resistance because you're young, because you're unknown, because people will assume you slept your way into the position. You'll have to prove yourself every single day. But if you succeed, you'll have your name on one of the most significant architectural projects in New York in the last decade. Why? I asked again. Why me? Because talent shouldn't be wasted, and because watching potential go unrealized pisses me off. He said it matter-of-factly, without sentimentality. So what do you say? Are you going to stay hidden, or are you going to fight? Something shifted in me then. Something that had been broken and dormant suddenly sparked to life. I thought about all the years I'd made myself small, all the times I'd accepted being invisible, all the dreams I'd buried because I was told they didn't matter. And I realized that the only person who could keep me in that corner now was me. They don't get to define me anymore, I said quietly. Then louder, with more certainty. Yes, I'll do it. Good. We start Monday. Alexander pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm having my assistant set up a meeting with the core team. In the meantime, go home, get some rest, and prepare yourself. This won't be easy. The next few days passed in a blur. I moved my few belongings from my cramped studio to a small but decent apartment that Sterling Enterprises arranged as part of my compensation package. I reviewed the project brief Alexander sent over. Elysian Towers was breathtaking in scope, a billion-dollar development that aimed to redefine urban living, and I was going to lead the design vision. Me, Clara Hale. The girl who'd been told to sit in the corner. Monday morning came too quickly. I arrived at Sterling Enterprises headquarters, a gleaming tower in Midtown, and took the elevator to the 15th floor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I was escorted to a conference room where the design team was already assembled. 7 people, all older than me, all with impressive credentials listed on the project sheet I'd been given. And at the head of the table sat a woman who would become both my greatest challenge and, eventually, my greatest ally. Isabel Thorne, COO of Sterling Enterprises, was in her early 40s with sharp features and sharper eyes. She looked at me the way a scientist might examine an unexpected variable in an experiment. Curious, skeptical, and slightly annoyed. So you're the mystery hire, she said without preamble. Alexander told me he was bringing someone in to lead design concept. I expected someone with more than a portfolio of college projects. The room went very quiet. The other designers looked uncomfortable. This was a test, I realized. Isabel was establishing the hierarchy, making it clear that I hadn't earned my place here. I had 2 choices. I could shrink back, apologize for existing, fall into the old pattern. Or I could do something different. I met her gaze directly. My college projects, as you call them, have more innovation in them than most of what passes for cutting-edge design in this city. But if you'd prefer someone more experienced who'll give you the same recycled concepts every other firm is producing, I'm sure you can find plenty of candidates. I'm here to create something that hasn't been done before. If that's not what Sterling Enterprises wants, I can leave right now. For a long moment, Isabel just stared at me. Then, slowly, a smile crept across her face. All right. Show us what you've got. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I spent 16-hour days at the office, sketching, modeling, refining. I presented my initial concepts to the team, weathering criticism and pushback. Some of it was legitimate. Some of it was just people testing to see if I'd break. I didn't break. I learned that I could argue for my ideas, defend them with data and vision, compromise where it made the design better, and stand firm where it didn't. But while I was building something new, my old life was trying to tear me down. 3 days after the wedding, my mother started calling. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that escalated from false sweetness to barely concealed rage. Clara, sweetheart, we need to talk about what happened. You embarrassed us terribly. That man had no right to say those things. You need to apologize to your sister and Mark. Call me back immediately. When I didn't respond, the tactics changed. She started reaching out to my old acquaintances, spreading a narrative that I'd seduced Alexander Sterling in a calculated move to destroy my sister's happiness. The story got traction in certain social circles, the ones that thrived on gossip and scandal. I started seeing knowing looks from people at coffee shops near the office. I got a few nasty messages from people who believed my mother's version of events. Then Sophia and Mark joined the attack. Mark's company was hemorrhaging after losing the Sterling investment. Other investors had gotten nervous, wondering what Alexander had seen that made him pull out so publicly. Mark started a whisper campaign in business circles, suggesting that I'd sabotage the deal out of jealousy. Sophia, working in interior design, tried a more direct approach. She got hired by one of the subcontractors working on the Elysian project. I didn't know until she showed up at a design meeting, smiling that same sharp smile she'd worn at her wedding. Clara! What a small world. I'm so excited to be working on this project with you. We can finally do something together as sisters. But Sophia wasn't there to collaborate. She was there to undermine. She subtly criticized my ideas in meetings, always framed as helpful suggestions but designed to make me look inexperienced. She befriended junior members of my team, taking them out for drinks, slowly poisoning them against me with stories about how I'd always been difficult, how I'd never been able to handle success, how I was in over my head. It was insidious, and it was working. I could feel the team's trust in me eroding. Isabel called me into her office one day, her expression concerned. Clara, I'm hearing some troubling things. Questions about your judgment, your ability to handle the scope of this project. I need to know if there's something going on that's affecting your work. I realized then that I had a choice. I could do what I'd always done. Stay silent. Let the narrative be controlled by others. Accept that maybe they were right, maybe I wasn't enough. Or I could fight back. Not with lies or manipulation, but with the truth, with my work. I spent the next month producing the most detailed, comprehensive design proposal of my career. I worked with engineers to ensure every innovative element was structurally sound. I brought in environmental consultants to verify the sustainability metrics. I created visualizations that showed exactly what Elysian Towers could become: a living, breathing ecosystem in the heart of the city. Green roofs and vertical gardens, solar panels integrated into the architecture, communal spaces that fostered connection, affordable units mixed with luxury condos to create real economic diversity. When I presented it to the full board, including Alexander, I didn't just show them drawings. I showed them data, market analysis, environmental impact reports, financial projections. I anticipated every question, every concern, every doubt, and when I finished, the room was silent. Then Isabel started clapping. Then the others joined in. Alexander nodded slowly, his expression unreadable but not displeased. That's exactly what this project needs, Isabel said. This is bold. This is different. This is right. She turned to Sophia, who had been sitting in the back of the room with a frozen smile. I think we can handle the design direction from here. We'll let you know if we need interior consultation for specific units. It was a polite dismissal, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. Sophia had lost. She gathered her things with trembling hands and left without another word. After the meeting, Isabel pulled me aside. I owe you an apology. When Alexander brought you in, I thought it was a mistake. A impulse decision based on some white knight complex. But you've proven me wrong. You've got talent, and more importantly, you've got spine. Don't lose that. Her words meant more to me than she could know. For the first time in my life, someone was respecting me not because of who my family was, but because of who I was becoming. But the battle wasn't over. With Sophia's approach failing, my family became more desperate. Mark's company finally declared bankruptcy. They blamed me publicly, doing interviews with business publications about how family betrayal had destroyed their dreams. My mother orchestrated a social media campaign, recruiting her friends to post vague accusations about ungrateful children and family loyalty. They tried to paint me as a villain, a monster who had destroyed her own family for personal gain. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. Despite everything they'd done, despite years of cruelty, there was still a part of me that wanted their approval, that wanted them to see me and love me. But I was learning that some people are incapable of love. They only understand possession, control, and dominance, and I refused to be possessed anymore. 6 months after the wedding, Elysian Towers broke ground. It was a major event, covered by architecture magazines and business press. And Sterling Enterprises decided to host a gala to celebrate the launch and reveal the full design to the public. Alexander asked me where I wanted to hold it. I thought for a long moment, then said, "The plaza." I want it at the plaza. He understood immediately. Are you sure? I'm sure. I need to go back. But this time, I'm not going to be hidden. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my mirror, barely recognizing myself. I wore a gown the color of emeralds, elegant and powerful. My hair was styled in a way that made me look older, more sophisticated. But it was my expression that had changed the most. I no longer looked like someone apologizing for existing. I looked like someone who belonged in the spotlight. The Plaza Ballroom had been transformed once again. but this time the theme was different. Instead of traditional opulence, we'd incorporated elements of the Elysian design. Living walls of plants, holographic displays showing the tower's sustainable features, lighting that mimicked natural sunlight. It was a statement. Old wealth meets new vision. I arrived with Alexander. We weren't dating, despite what the gossip columns speculated. Our relationship was professional, built on mutual respect and shared ambition. But he'd become something I'd never had before. A friend, someone who saw my worth without me having to beg for it. The room was filled with city officials, investors, press, and influencers. And somewhere in that crowd, I knew my family was there. I'd seen their names on the guest list. They'd used every last connection they had to get invitations, desperate to be part of an event they knew would be significant. But they weren't guests of honor. They were just faces in the crowd. When it was time for speeches, Alexander went first. He talked about the vision behind Elysian Towers, the commitment to sustainability, the goal of creating not just buildings but communities. Then he introduced me, Clara Hale, the brilliant architect who turned a dream into a blueprint for the future. I walked onto the stage, and the applause was thunderous. Real applause, not polite courtesy. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I found them. My mother, father, and Sophia, standing near the back. They looked older somehow, diminished. The power they'd held over me for so long had evaporated because I'd stopped giving it to them. I began to speak, my voice steady and clear. Thank you all for being here tonight. This project means everything to me, but not just because it's the biggest achievement of my career. It means something because of where I was 6 months ago. I was sitting in this very room, hidden behind a wall of flowers, being told that I was an embarrassment, that I should be grateful to even be tolerated by my own family. I saw my mother's face go pale. People around her started to make the connection, whispers spreading like ripples. I want to dedicate this project to everyone who's ever been told to stay in the shadows, who's been told they're not enough, that they should be quiet, that their dreams are too big for someone like them. Because here's what I learned. Silence isn't safety. Silence is a cage. And the only person who can unlock that cage is you. I clicked to the next slide, showing a visualization of the completed Elysian Towers, green and gleaming against the New York skyline. This building is about reaching up, about creating light where there was darkness, about proving that beautiful things can grow from broken foundations. We all have the power to rebuild ourselves, to become the architects of our own lives. We just have to be brave enough to pick up the tools and start building. The applause was deafening. People stood. I saw Alexander smiling, Isabel nodding with approval. I saw city council members making notes. I saw journalists typing frantically. And I saw my family, frozen and silent, realizing that the daughter they'd thrown away had become someone they could never touch again. After the speeches, I mingled with guests, answering questions about the design, discussing timelines and sustainability features. I was in my element, confident and articulate. I was no longer the scared girl begging for scraps of affection. I was Clara Hale, architect, visionary, survivor. Then I felt a hand on my arm. I turned to see my mother, her makeup perfect but her eyes desperate. Clara, we need to talk. Please. Your father and we've been trying to reach you. Can we go somewhere private? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but a distant, cold pity. No. We can talk right here. Sophia appeared beside her, and for the first time I could remember, she looked uncertain. Clara, please, we're family. We made mistakes, but we're still family. Can't we work this out? Work what out, exactly? I asked calmly. The years of being ignored? The financial support you got while I was told I wasn't worth investing in? The wedding where you publicly humiliated me for entertainment? Which part are we working out? We were wrong, my mother said, and her voice actually cracked. I was wrong. I see that now. But you're my daughter. Both of you are my daughters. Can't we start over? I felt Alexander's presence beside me, a silent support. I thought about what starting over would mean. It would mean letting them back in. It would mean opening myself to being hurt again. It would mean pretending that the past could be erased with an apology born not from genuine remorse but from desperation now that I had something they wanted. Access. Reflected glory. A daughter they could finally be proud of, not because of who I was, but because of what I'd achieved. No, I said simply. You're not apologizing because you're sorry for what you did to me. You're apologizing because you got caught, because you lost everything while I gained something you want. Money, status, respect. Those are the only currencies you understand. You never loved me. You loved what you thought I should be, what you could mold me into, and when I didn't fit that vision, you discarded me. But Clara, my father started. I cut him off. You had 26 years to be a parent to me. You chose not to. You chose to invest in one daughter and abandon the other. You chose to watch me struggle and do nothing. You chose to let Mom and Sophia treat me like garbage. Those were your choices. And now I'm making mine. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your love. I needed those things when I was a child, when I was desperate and alone. But I'm not that person anymore. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no satisfaction in seeing it. Just a profound sense of closure. You made me feel invisible for so long that I started to believe I was. But I'm not invisible. I never was. You just refused to see me. And that's your loss, not mine. My mother reached for me, but I stepped back. I'm not shutting the door on you forever, I said. But I'm also not pretending that we're okay. If you want any kind of relationship with me in the future, it will be on my terms. It will require real change, real accountability, and real respect. Not just words when you need something from me. Until then, I need you to leave me alone. I need space to build the life I should have had all along. They stood there for a moment, shell-shocked. Then my father nodded slowly and took my mother's arm, guiding her away. Sophia lingered, opening her mouth as if to say something else, but then closed it and followed. I watched them leave, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite relief, not quite joy. Something more complex. The severing of chains I'd worn so long I'd forgotten they were there. Alexander touched my shoulder lightly. You okay? I am, I said. And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I'm okay. The gala continued late into the night. I talked with city planners about zoning innovations. I discussed green building certifications with environmental groups. I laughed with Isabel and the design team, feeling like I belonged. Like I'd found my people. Not perfect people, but real people who valued me for my work, my ideas, my contributions. Near midnight, Alexander and I took the elevator to one of the upper floors of the plaza, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. We stood in silence for a while, watching the lights of Manhattan stretch out in every direction. Somewhere out there, in the exact spot where Elysian Towers would rise, the foundation was already being poured. My vision was becoming concrete and steel, something permanent and real. You did it, Alexander said quietly. You actually did it. I smiled, but it was bittersweet. I still have moments where I doubt, where I hear my mother's voice telling me I'm not enough, where I wonder if I'm just pretending to be someone I'm not. That's called being human, Clara. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt, it's moving forward despite it, and you've done that every single day for 6 months. Do you know how rare that is? Most people, when they face the kind of resistance and sabotage you've dealt with, they give up. They decide it's not worth the fight. But you didn't. I thought about the girl I'd been at Sophia's wedding, trembling on that stage, voiceless and powerless. I thought about the journey from that moment to this one. It hadn't been easy. There had been nights I'd cried myself to sleep, days I'd wanted to quit, moments I'd been convinced my family was right and I was delusional. But I'd kept going. Not because I was fearless, but because the alternative was going back to being invisible. And I'd rather fail trying to be seen than succeed at disappearing. They wanted me behind the scenes, I said, looking out at the glittering skyline. Now I own the view. Alexander smiled. Yes, you do. And this is just the beginning. Elysian is launching your career, but it's not defining it. You get to decide what comes next, what you build next, who you become next. I turned to look at him. Thank you. For seeing me when no one else did. I didn't see you first, Clara. I just saw what you'd already created and wondered why you'd stopped. You saw yourself. You just needed someone to confirm that your vision was valid. He paused. But I will take credit for one thing. I gave you a battlefield. You won the war. We stayed there for a while longer, watching the city sleep and wake and sleep again. And as the first rays of dawn started to break over the horizon, I made a promise to myself. I would never again make myself small for someone else's comfort. I would never again accept being hidden. I would never again believe that my worth was determined by how much someone else valued me. I was enough. I had always been enough. And anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve a place in my life. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Elysian Towers rose floor by floor, its distinctive green terraces becoming a landmark on the city skyline. My work was featured in architecture journals. I was invited to speak at conferences. Other projects came my way. Opportunities I could actually choose based on my passion rather than desperation. I hired my own team, mentoring young architects the way I wished someone had mentored me, making sure they knew their ideas mattered. I also started therapy. Real therapy, with a professional who specialized in family trauma. I learned words for what I'd experienced: emotional neglect, scapegoating, financial abuse, triangulation. Having language for it helped. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant what happened to me was real and damaging, and it meant I could heal. The healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt powerful and free. Other days I grieved for the childhood I'd never had, for the parents who'd never really seen me, for the sister who'd never been an ally. My family continued to try to reach me periodically. My mother sent birthday cards with long letters about regret. Sophia emailed occasionally, asking to meet for coffee. My father tried the silent approach, hoping I'd eventually break and reach out first. But I held my boundary. I responded politely but distantly. I never met them in person. I wasn't ready. Maybe I'd never be ready, and I was learning that was okay. Forgiveness wasn't mandatory. Reconciliation wasn't required for closure. I could move forward without them, and that was a valid choice. A year to the day after Sophia's wedding, I stood in the completed lobby of Elysian Towers for the grand opening. The space was breathtaking. Sunlight poured through massive windows, filtered through living walls that brought nature into the urban environment. The lobby was designed as a community space, with areas for residents to gather, work, or simply exist together. It was everything I'd envisioned and more. Isabel stood beside me, watching the first residents move in. "This is going to change the standard for urban development," she said. "Every firm in the city is already trying to copy elements of this design." "You've started a movement, Clara." "A movement," I repeated, testing the words. A year ago, I couldn't even speak up at a family dinner. Now I've started a movement. She laughed. "Character development. It's a hell of a thing." Alexander joined us, holding 3 champagne flutes. "A toast," he announced, "to Clara Hale, the architect who refused to stay in the shadows." We clinked glasses, and I let myself feel the full weight of the moment. Pride, yes. Accomplishment, absolutely. But also something deeper. Freedom. The freedom to define myself on my own terms. The freedom to build not just structures, but a life that reflected my values, my dreams, my truth. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, a space I decorated with care, filled with books and plants and light. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from colleagues, friends, mentors I'd found along the way. There was also a message from my mother. "I saw the opening on the news. The building is beautiful. I'm proud of you." I stared at those words for a long time. A year ago, they would have meant everything to me. I would have clung to them, desperate for any crumb of validation. But now, I realized something important. Her pride was irrelevant. It didn't add to my achievement. It didn't validate my worth. I'd built Elysian Towers without her support, without her belief, without her love. I'd done it despite her, not because of her. And that made it entirely mine. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I opened my laptop and started sketching. New ideas, new dreams, new possibilities. Because this was just the beginning. I'd spent 26 years being told I was the supporting character in someone else's story. Now I was the protagonist of my own. And the best part? I got to write every chapter that came next. So here's what I learned from being humiliated at my sister's wedding, from being treated as less than, from finally walking away and building something beautiful from the rubble. Your family doesn't get to define you. Their inability to see your worth is not evidence that you lack it. It's evidence that they're looking through a distorted lens, one shaped by their own insecurities, jealousies, and limitations. When you're ready, when you've had enough, you have the power to step out of the shadows they've confined you to and into the light you create yourself. It won't be easy. There will be people who try to pull you back, who tell you you're being selfish, who weaponize guilt and obligation. There will be days you doubt yourself, days you want to give up, days the old patterns try to reassert themselves. But every time you choose yourself, every time you honor your worth, every time you refuse to shrink, you're building something they can never take away. You're building a life that's authentically yours. They wanted me in the back row. Now I design the buildings that define the skyline. And if there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. You don't have to accept the role they've cast you in. You can rewrite the script. You can build your own stage. You can step into the spotlight and claim what's always been yours. The power to be seen. What about you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever been the one expected to stay quiet while others shine? What did you do about it? Or what do you wish you could do? Drop your story in the comments. Let's build a community of people who refuse to stay hidden. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they matter, that they're enough, that they deserve to be seen. Because we all deserve to own our own skyline.